Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Disney Vacation Club show, or the DVC show as we call it. Coming to you live from the Bob Varley studio in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Pete Werner, joined this week via Skype by my good friends from the DVC store, Mr. Jerry Saito.
May the 4th be with you.
Oh, Lord. You've been inside too long.
Yes, hello, everyone.
Our associate producer, Corey Fiascanaro.
Welcome home.
And Mr. Sean Falk.
Hi.
And operating the controls, Ed Sheeran.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Well, welcome, folks. Welcome to the show. Hope your Monday is going well. Just want to remind everyone that this show is brought to you by DVCstore.com. So if you're in the market to buy a DVC contract or sell your DVC contract, please give them a call. And I don't have the number off the top of my head, Jerry.
1-800-550-6493.
There you go. Or DVCstore.com. All right. This week we thought we'd get back to doing one of our pros and cons shows. And we thought that talking about Aulani, because that's always on my mind. So we thought we'd talk about the pros and cons of Aulani. Now, Jerry has been to Aulani, but before it was open. I guess it was under construction.
Correct.
Craig, Sean, and I have been there. Fiasco has not. So I guess we'll get some mixed perspectives about, for the few folks who haven't been there and stayed there, what their perception of the pros and cons are, and then those of us that have been there and stayed there, some of us multiple times, we'll share our thoughts. So let's see, who do I want to start with? How about Fiasco?
Yeah. So looking at Aulani, it's something that I definitely want to do, but a con, I think, would be obviously it's kind of a reach. So when you're thinking, I want to plan a Disney vacation, I mean, unless you've been to Aulani, your mind isn't going to instantly drift to like, oh yeah, Disney vacation, I'm going to book Aulani. It's kind of far off. Like you're probably thinking Walt Disney World, Disneyland, something of that nature. And if you were to plan an Aulani trip, that plane flight is going to be pretty intense. And also, it's not a theme park, so it's a different type of experience. Speaking as somebody who's never done it, it's something that really appeals to me, like the relaxation spa type environment is something I'm really into. But just thinking about it not being a Disney theme park, but being a Disney resort and spa, and then the plane ride, and then the price tag. I mean, those are kind of the things that make it a little bit more of a reach to do an Aulani vacation for me.
Well, I know Sean has been checking out availability at Aulani for the fall. And how has it been looking to you, Sean? Is availability relatively good right now?
Yeah, it's relatively available. I think that, I was looking in September for a lot of it. A week for a deluxe studio. Well, I was looking at 2 bedrooms. They're around 400 points for a week. And then like a 1 bedroom is more around 250 to 300 points, just depending on the view, I guess. So, and that's for a week there. So it is definitely pricier points wise, of the resorts, but I mean, you're going to Hawaii, so that's a big chunk of it.
Well, for me, one of the pros of Aulani is that it is a Disney resort that doesn't have a theme park, and it stands on its own, which is really something special. And when they built that resort, they expected that people were going to spend maybe 2 days, maybe 3 at the resort, and the rest of their time they would be driving around the island. And they quickly learned that that wasn't the case, that there's so much to do there. There's so many activities going on there, that people were staying at the resort a lot longer than they expected. So they had to expand the pools, the food offerings. They had to do all this construction over the last few years to address that. And, you know, yeah, a con is that if you're coming from the East Coast, that is a long flight, and it can be an expensive flight. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's not difficult to find good deals. Often what we've suggested to people is fly to California, spend a couple days in California, and then get a round trip from LA to Honolulu. And when you break it up like that, you tend to find ultimately a better deal.
Yeah, there are a lot of flights right now that are running for the fall to Hawaii that are around $300 round trip. So it's definitely not. Some are even in the 200s if you're going out of LA or San Francisco if you're on the West Coast. There's some on the East Coast that are running about $400 to $450, which is a lot less than it usually would be.
So, as someone who's never been to Aulani, this question in chat right here kind of struck me. And to your point, Pete, you said that they were planning for people to have to go out and do other things, but most people are generally staying at the actual resort. Question from chat from Marco says, besides the beach, what other things do you have to do at Aulani, though?
Well, okay. First, again, this is all on the pro list. The lazy river in the middle of the resort is unbelievable. Okay, it's the best lazy river I've ever seen. It's just it's paradise, right? The spa facilities at this resort are ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it. It is so over the top. It's huge. They have incredible treatment menu, and just the facility itself is just stunning. Then you have especially for DVC members, you have activities going on every day in the members. What the hell is it called? You know, the members area, the community center. Oh, yeah. You know, there were ukulele lessons going on the last time we were there. There's all sorts of activities that go on in there. Plus, you have 1, 2, 3 separate pools. You've got the big pool, you've got the infinity pool out in the front, and then you've got the adults-only pool there as well. So if pool and cabana days are your thing, it's a great resort. Now, that's not even my thing, but I've likened Aulani to Disney Cruise Line on land. You've got an excursions desk that will tell you everything that they all the excursions around the island that they offer, and that includes island hopping, to doing day trips to other islands in Hawaii.
There's also a golf course right across the street from Aulani. So if you're a golfer, like, that's a great opportunity. And really, you also have to remember that your time is so off while you're there. Because I remember the first time that I was going, I got there and they were like, "Oh, the lazy river closes at 6, and all the other pools close at 7, except the adult one, which closes at like 10, I think." And I was like, "The pool closes at 6?" Like, I was like, that's a little ridiculous. And by 6 o'clock, I'm like, "Oh, it's midnight on the East Coast." Like, I get why things are starting to wind down, because most of the people are coming from Japan, or they're coming from the United States, or, the mainland of the United States, and people's timing is off. I remember many days being up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, like, okay, like getting ready to start my day because it's 9:30 where I'm from. So I'm up and about and nothing's open yet. So you do have a weird time issue there.
Yeah, but you get over that. You get over that in a couple of days. I mean, it's jet lag, right? And you get over that in a couple of days. Another con that is the expense. Okay, what it costs. If you're just doing the regular hotel side, it's very expensive. sometimes unnecessarily so. And I find that even when, I mean, I think it's an amazing product, but I think that, you know, when I say it's like cruise line on land, it's like cruise line on land, including the price. And, you know, even when they're offering specials, a lot of times I'll go and I'll look at the price. I'm like, yeah, it's still too much. And then after becoming a DVC member, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, because the facility is amazing, right? It's just amazing. But it's a lot of points. It's a lot of points as compared to, you know, the resorts here. It's definitely more expensive, but
I think that does a lot into the season, though. Like the summer season is very expensive. Christmas is very expensive. You know, the spring break time very expensive. But there are some pockets, some off-season times at Aulani that aren't very expensive. You can actually, not to mention when you hit it in the off-season, airline tickets are much cheaper. So you can fly there for a better value. But if you're going to go during the popular times, yeah, the point chart's a little bit higher, and the airlines will be higher because the demand is there. You know, that's why they.
I would also
going back to Aulani. You mentioned it's not really a theme park environment, but to me, like, so I've been to Hawaii 6 times, and I think when you get to Hawaii, no theme park, but it in itself is like this magical place. The culture, the food, everything about Hawaii is just so incredible that it's like a living theme park because it's so unique and so different from the mainland. So Hawaii is spectacular, and yeah, Aulani is too. So you get kind of the best of both. You get to this wonderful resort that Disney built, and then you get this culture and this food and this music and a place that you will never duplicate it. It is amazing.
And so, I think for a lot of people, this is a once in a lifetime, a once in a lifetime trip. And people on the West Coast much more likely to go because that's a 4 or 5 hour flight for them, as opposed to from the East Coast where it's like 9 or 10 hours. Yeah. So I think for a lot of people, this is a once in a lifetime trip. But
I thought that too. I thought, oh, that's my honeymoon spot. You know, I'm going to go there for my honeymoon. I've been there 6 times. Like, I could not get enough. Now, again, I haven't stayed at Aulani. I've been to Oahu, been to Maui, been to the islands. But I thought, okay, this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip. To me, it was magic. I was like, I have to come back here. Like, if I could afford it, I would move there. I love it. It's so beautiful.
Well, that's the other thing. The other con. Not only is Aulani expensive, but all of Hawaii is expensive. You have to remember that pretty much all the food that they have there is being imported, right? They're not growing it there. They're not raising it there. They're bringing it in from the mainland. So that costs more money. So it is definitely a much, much higher cost of living, much more expensive place to vacation.
Yeah.
That being said, I've never walked away saying that wasn't worth it.
Right.
In fact, I keep wanting to go back.
Yeah, I know the first time I went, like, because I do always recommend to people getting a 1-bedroom because you get a full kitchen. And I ended up cooking a lot while I was there. Whereas if I were going to Disney World or Disneyland, I would eat out. But there isn't a lot of variety of food. I mean, because there's just the one quick service, and then there's character buffet, and then there's their signature dining. But if you're going for 7 or 8 days, you can't. You don't want to necessarily just do that same thing again and again. And so I cooked, but it was, even buying ingredients and stuff was very expensive. I know I got a pineapple. It was $10. I got a box of Frosted Flakes, and it was like $8. And I was like, oh wow,
yeah,
like this is just a regular sized box of cereal.
But
like,
we were also shopping right across the street from the resort, and that was definitely a tourist. That was definitely a tourist store. So those prices were inflated even for Hawaii.
We stopped at Costco, and we did. We had a kitchen. Again, I didn't say that, but we had a kitchen. So we went to Costco. We loaded up on all kinds of food, and we cooked. Because if you go out to dinner out there, it does get very expensive.
Oh yeah.
You guys brought up back a while when we were talking about things to do, excursions. I know, and and I know you guys went on a helicopter tour, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What other excursions can you do?
Go ahead.
I was going to say you can go to the North Shore, which is, it's just about an hour's drive, maybe not quite that far, but that's where some of the biggest waves in the world are, and watch some of these surfers just do what they do. It's absolutely incredible. So you got. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say, I would not do the North Shore as an excursion. I would take that money, rent a car for the day, because there's an Alamo car rental right there at the resort. Rent a car for the day, drive up, because the excursion, you're going to be timed. Right. And you want to be able to explore. And I've mentioned it on shows before. You drive up to the North Shore, you hang around in the town of Haleiwa, maybe have some lunch, and then around sunset, you go over to Turtle Bay, which, if you've watched the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall, that's the movie. That's the hotel. And you can go over to Turtle Bay. You can sit by the pool bar, and get some drinks and some appetizers and watch the sunset. It is probably one of the most prolific sunsets you will ever see from that vantage point. It's incredible. But I would not do a shore excursion up to the North Shore. I'd go ahead and drive. But I'm sorry, Jerry, you was getting ready to say something else.
You could also go into the Waikiki, and they do surf lessons again. If you're into surfing, they have tiny waves to bigger waves where you could actually rent a longboard, and you could have like an experience with a coach or go out on your own and actually learn how to surf. And the waves are very mild. They're not very aggressive. So they're like little rolling hills, and you could learn. If that's something you've ever had the desire to do, it's a great place to do it. You can.
Well, the wave situation depends on what time of the year you're there. The North Shore has some of the biggest is one of the most biggest surfing areas in the world.
Yeah.
And it's not unusual for them to have 20-foot waves. So I want to just make sure that we're saying about time of year.
Yeah, I was talking Waikiki. If you're in the North Shore, that's locals only or professionals only. Nobody's getting out there on vacation surfing the North Shore. And again, it's mostly locals or professionals. But if on the Waikiki side, when you're over on by Diamond Head, that's where you can ride these small waves and learn. And it's year round. Like they're little rollers, so they're easy to put on. And then
Sean, you had something.
Yeah, I have done the helicopter tour excursion, which I did book through Aulani. It was a really short walk. It was like 10 minutes away. I walked down to where the helicopter, landing pad was and did that. I've also done a Pearl Harbor excursion through Aulani. So we got to go see Pearl Harbor. They took us out on the boat and took us to the actual landmark, and you got to get out and walk on it. I don't think they actually allow that anymore, but they did at the time. You can do the day trips to Kauai. You can do the day trips to Maui. You also can book an excursion that takes you up to all the places where they filmed for like the show Lost and Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, all the shows that have filmed in Hawaii. They kind of have like a movie set tour or whatever, like a backlot tour. That's a good option. That was cool. Even just the there was one day that me and Pete the last time went to the mall that was there, and it's this humongous like 3-story outdoor mall. So it was just very, very cool to get over there and do that on just like a break day. But it's the only place I've ever been where the first time I went, I spent the entire 8 days at the resort and never left at all. And that's I would never do that in my normal life. Like I would never ever plan a trip where I didn't have activities planned every day, because I just would get bored, and I was afraid I was going to get bored. And I was like, wow, I really just relaxed and enjoyed myself on this. So in that way, it's like a Disney cruise.
I've actually done the Pearl Harbor excursion as well, just not with Aulani. I did it with the U.S. Navy.
Oh, that's what the smirk was for. I'm seeing the smirk on his face. I'm like, he's got something to say. Well, yeah, it's a little bit of a different experience, but.
Right.
I mean, the biggest thing to me that they offer there is the luau. Going to that is worth every penny that's ever been spent on that luau. I think it is the most fun show that I've seen, and Disney puts it on so well. They have a regular option. They also have a VIP option. So the regular is about $100 to $150 a person, and then the VIP is over $200 a person. But it is a fantastic show, and I always tell people to do it at the beginning of their trip. Like, you want to do it as early as you possibly can, because it rains a lot, and so if it gets rained out, they will just rebook you onto the next luau, like another day. But of course, if you wait till the end of your trip and then it gets rained out, you're not going to be there for your next appointment, and you'll just have to get a refund. So, but it's well worth it. It's fantastic.
All right, Craig, I want to bring you into this because you have been out there a few times. What are your pros and cons of Aulani, Craig?
I've only been there the one time back in 2013. I would.
Oh, I thought you'd been out there again.
No, just the one time when we all went out way back when, and I would say my pro is the theming 100%, as you've already talked about before. To me, like, when we got to Hawaii and we walked through the airport, that open airport, and it, like, that started to feel like Hawaii. And then as we were driving around and getting to Aulani, it kind of went back and forth, because where Ko'olina is, it's like very dry and mountainous, at least at the time of year we were there in May. Yeah. And once we got there, it was like, once we got onto the resort area, I was like, okay, this is Hawaii. This feels like an authentic version of what they're doing at the Polynesian. So I was sold on it for that. And I think that for me is honestly, that's the biggest selling point. I could not imagine going to Hawaii without at least staying a night or two there. Depending on your budget, if you can afford a 7-day stay at Aulani, why the heck not? Just go for it. If you can only afford 4 days, if flights are good and you want to only be at Aulani, I could even say, I could swing that. But if you can stay 7 nights by doing like an Airbnb, but you can still afford a night or two at Aulani, I could not imagine not doing it. The resort is just so incredibly beautiful, and the only con really is the area in Ko'olina. It's just kind of landlocked. I know there's other hotels around that you can escape to, and there is a little bit close within walking distance, but in terms of the stuff that you are going to want to see, the North Shore, if you want to do the Dole Pineapple crazy area, like, that's every place you have to go beyond that. You have to drive or find a way to get there, and so that's my only real major con on it. It's been so long with the food situation that I don't really remember that much about it. I remember the food was good that I enjoyed everything, but not enough to make a statement on it. And ultimately, I will say I can kind of, in terms of like the amount of days and stuff, I was looking back at my footage this morning, not even knowing that this was going to be a show topic. Just I'm going through old hard drives, looking at everything, and I noticed after about 3 or 4 days there, that's when it went from like having hundreds of video clips a day just down to like 5 or 10. And so I think that for me is saying, like, at least to really get the most out of Aulani and experience it, you do need at least like 3 or 4 days there. So
and to your point earlier, Craig, if you can't afford to do the full week, if it's too much to do the full week at Aulani, then my suggestion would be, do 3 or 4 nights at Aulani. Take a look at Turtle Bay. Turtle Bay is, every time I've looked at it, I found the prices reasonable, especially when comparing it to Aulani. It is up on the North Shore. It is in an area that they're not developing. They're not allowed to develop any more hotels. So it's still very much old Oahu. It's old Hawaii, and it's got that vibe to it. And Turtle Bay is not part of a massive hotel chain. It's independently family-owned hotel, and it kind of has that that charm to it, and the service is magnificent, absolutely magnificent. And you're paying, you're paying like half what you pay at Aulani. So
I would even suggest taking, like, even if you could only do Aulani for 3 or 4 days, and maybe just hopping over to a different island like Maui or something and staying a couple of days there. I mean, I've been to Hawaii a couple of times now, but I've only been to Oahu. I've not island hopped at all. So that is something I'd recommend doing because it would be cool. But one of the other big pros to me is the resale price on it. Is fantastic. I own at Aulani and I bought direct. I wish that I had bought resale because it literally would have been like half the price. Comparatively, it tends to average around $100 to $105 a point for most Aulanis that I see come through. And even then, because it's not sold out, Disney's very unlikely to use their right of first refusal. So it's pretty much a lock to get it if you're actually going to put in the bid. And I think if you're somebody who books 7 months or less anyway, that's like one of the most perfect resale options that you can have, because a lot of the less expensive ones have a higher, less expensive contracts have either a higher membership dues fee, or they expire in like 2042 or earlier, whereas Aulani expires in like 2066. So I mean, you are 2062, I think. So you still have like 40 years almost, or what I think it's somewhere around 40 or 42 years left on it. So you definitely have a long time to get to use it. And if you're fine going to Disney World and staying at like Old Key West or Saratoga Springs for your last minute type stuff, then buying Aulani is some of the best use of your money because you'd pay so much less per point.
Well, let's springboard off of that, Jerry, and talk about resale prices on Aulani and what that looks like.
Yeah, there's some great deals with Aulani right now. So, mentioned between 100 to 105 per point. Being in the pandemic situation, there are some sellers agreeable to less than 100 per point. So, Aulani is a good option. The maintenance fees, they're on the higher side of the 14 properties, 15 properties, but they're not at the highest. They're kind of a middle of the road maintenance fee. I think they're $8 and $8.37 per point, I believe. But it's a great value. We do have a lot of people who do buy it who are less than 7-month travelers, or the ones that want to book at Aulani for summer or Christmas. So if that's a thing, then you should be buying Aulani, because it is tough to get into during like holiday seasons. But yeah, it is a good value. It's one of the cheaper for one of the longer terms, so lesser price per point, but you get more time on that contract. And one thing there's not a lot of negatives on Aulani, but one thing that I did want to mention, maintenance fees. There's something called a transit tax that you do have to pay when you go to Aulani. This is the only DVC resort that actually has an extra cost associated to it. When you check in to any hotel in Hawaii, and Aulani obviously is there, there's something called the transit tax. So it's a minor tax that the state of Hawaii is going to charge you. It depends on how many points you're going to use, but just be aware that when you check in, they're going to ask you for this tax, and it's like, I can give you how to calculate it, but just to keep it simple, it's like less than $100 for a week. So relative to that, it just depends on the size of the villa, the number of points, but just be aware there's a little bit of an extra cost when you check in, and that's not just Aulani; it's any hotel in Hawaii.
I wanna mention, as somebody who's never been to Aulani, I do daydream a bit. And about a year ago, we talked about Aulani, that I was part of that conversation for the first time. And during that conversation, Pete, you mentioned kind of a itinerary that would look a little like you taking 2 days at Disneyland, then taking a trip to Aulani, then taking a trip to Tokyo, like as a kind of go big trip. And that's kind of the Aulani trip that I daydream about maybe having one day, is flying from Florida to California, doing a long weekend in California, then going to Aulani for a few days, kind of like having a nice relaxation reset, and then doing a big trip to Tokyo. That's kind of how I had it in my head. That would be like my ideal trip. But again, in that sort of environment, obviously, the price tag, there's probably going to be some sticker shock on that as well.
That's what Sean and I did, something similar to that a few years ago when we were out in Aulani for a week, and then we flew out to Tokyo for a week, and then we came back to Honolulu and spent a night at the Hilton Hawaiian Village. Never again. In Waikiki. Never again.
Oh yeah, I did not like that.
And so we did. I think for that one we did a round trip from Orlando to Honolulu, and then we did a separate round trip from Honolulu to Tokyo. It ended up working out to be less expensive. That is a great way to get out to Tokyo. Granted, it's a big trip and it's an expensive trip, but even if you just used Hawaii as Aulani as your resting point for a couple of days before going on to Tokyo, if you're coming from the East Coast, it's a great way to get there.
I would agree with what Sean said also about island hopping. Like Aulani is beautiful, and it is kind of in its own area on the island of Oahu. So if you want to really experience Hawaii, explore Oahu, but go to Maui, go to Kauai, kind of go to the big island, and you can. There's just a lot to do out there. If it's an option, and it might be a dream vacation, go and see it as much as you can, because it is such a magical place.
All right. I think that's a good place to stop. So that, folks, is our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again next week with another edition of the DVC Show. Have a great week.